Welcome back to Insightful Wanderer, the place where we explore the strange, fascinating, and sometimes forgotten stories from history and the world around us. Today, we're diving into a shocking story from the 1800s, a tale of desperation, murder, and secrets that shocked an entire community. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe and comment if you enjoy uncovering history's hidden stories, and it helps us bring you more fascinating content every week. In the late 19th century, as the gaslights flickered to life against the encroaching twilight, the city of Chicago was a titan of industry, a sprawling metropolis carved from the American prairie. It was a city of stark, dramatic contrasts, a place of boundless ambition and profound despair, of glittering fortunes and grinding poverty. This was the Gilded Age, an era where progress was measured in miles of railroad track and tons of steel, and where the smoke from 1,000 factory chimneys painted the sky a permanent, hazy grey. Chicago was the beating, industrial heart of a nation hurtling toward a new century. It was the great crossroads of America, a vortex of commerce where grain, lumber, and livestock converged, processed, and shipped out to feed and build a growing country. The air itself seemed to hum with a raw, relentless energy, a promise that for those with enough grit and ingenuity, anything was possible. Fortunes could be forged from nothing, and empires could rise from the mud of the city streets. This was the city famously dubbed the hog butcher for the world. The Union Stockyards, a city within the city, processed millions of animals a year, a grim but efficient engine of the American diet. The stench of the stockyards, a potent mix of livestock, smoke, and slaughter, was a constant reminder of the city's foundation, built on muscle, sweat, and the relentless transformation of life into commodity. It was a brutal, unsentimental process. Yet it fueled the city's explosive growth and drew hundreds of thousands of people to its gates. They came from the farmlands of America and the villages of Europe, all chasing a dream of prosperity. Among the largest and most influential of these immigrant groups were the Germans. They brought with them their language, their culture, and their trades, establishing tight-knit communities on the city's north side. They built churches, founded breweries, and opened butcher shops, recreating a piece of the old world in the heart of the new. It was from this world that one of Chicago's most successful and notorious businessmen would emerge. His name was Adolph Luetgert. Born in Gütersloh, Prussia in 1845, Luetgert was a product of this ambitious, striving generation. He learned the tanner's trade as a young man, but like so many others, he heard the call of America. He emigrated in the late 1860s, arriving in Chicago with little more than his skills and a formidable determination to succeed. He was a man perfectly suited to his time and place, hard-working, shrewd, and possessed of an unyielding self-belief. After trying his hand at several ventures, he found his true calling in a trade familiar to his German heritage: sausage making. In 1879, he founded the A.L. Luetgert Sausage and Packing Company. It started small, but Luetgert's ambition was anything but. He poured all his energy into the business, perfecting his recipes and relentlessly expanding his operations. Chicagoans developed a taste for his products, and his company thrived. By the 1890s, Adolph Luetgert was no longer just a local butcher. He had become a veritable titan of the trade, a man known throughout the city and beyond as the undisputed Sausage King. His 5-story factory at the corner of Diversey and Hermitage was a monument to his success, one of the largest and most modern sausage-making facilities in the country. He had achieved the American dream in its most tangible form. He was wealthy, respected, and a pillar of the German-American community. He lived in a fine home with his wife and children, the very picture of a self-made man who had conquered the new world. But the Gilded Age was an era of surfaces, and beneath the gleaming veneer of progress and prosperity, a darker reality often festered. The same relentless drive that built fortunes could also fuel obsession and cruelty. The same factories that symbolized innovation could also hide the most terrible of secrets, and behind the respectable facade of the Luetgert family, tensions were simmering, resentments were growing, and a private drama was building toward a horrifying climax. The story of Adolph Luetgert is more than a tale of immigrant success. It is a story about the darkness that can lurk behind a public mask of achievement. For within the walls of his great factory, a chilling mystery was about to unfold, a mystery that would transfix the nation, challenge the limits of forensic science, and forever cement the name of the Sausage King in the annals of American crime. His success was undeniable, but a dark story steeped in rumor and horror was waiting to be told. Luetgert had been married twice. His second wife, Louisa Bicknese, married him in 1878. Together they had 4 children. On the outside, life seemed perfect, but behind closed doors, tension and arguments grew. Louisa's disappearance would soon shock the city. In May 1897, Louisa vanished without a trace. Friends and relatives reported her missing, but Luetgert insisted she had gone to visit a relative. Weeks passed, and worry turned to suspicion. Neighbors began noticing strange smells coming from the sausage factory. A mystery was unfolding. On May 7, 1897, just 3 days after Louisa Luetgert was last seen, the investigation into her baffling disappearance took a decisive and dreadful turn. Frustrated by Adolph Luetgert's inconsistent stories and unnerving composure, the Chicago police, led by the formidable Captain Herman Schuetler, shifted their focus. Their suspicions, once a scattered collection of neighborhood rumors and familial anxieties, now coalesced around a single grim location, the A.L. Luetgert Sausage and Packing Company. The 5-story brick building on the corner of Diversey and Hermitage Avenue was more than just the source of Luetgert's wealth. It was a monument to his ambition, a sprawling labyrinth of industrial machinery. And now, police believed, it was a crime scene. As Captain Schuetler and his men stepped across the threshold, they were immediately assaulted by a strange and unsettling odor. It was not the familiar savory smell of spiced and smoked meats that one would expect. Instead, a caustic chemical stench hung heavy in the air, sharp and acrid, catching in the back of their throats. It was the smell of lye, potent and overpowering. The factory floor was a scene of eerie stillness. The great steam engines were cold, the grinders silent. Rows of iron hooks, normally laden with carcasses, hung empty, and swayed gently in the draughts, their metallic surfaces glinting under the glow of the officers' lanterns. The initial search of the main floors yielded nothing. The building was vast, a maze of rooms for processing, smoking, and packing. Every corner seemed to hide only the mundane tools of the trade. For hours the detectives meticulously worked their way through the building, their frustration mounting with every empty room and corridor. It seemed possible that their strong hunch was leading them nowhere. But Captain Schwettler was a veteran of Chicago's darkest corners, and his instincts were rarely wrong. He ordered his men to the basement, a subterranean level of the factory that housed the heavy-duty processing equipment. It was here that the chemical smell was at its most intense, emanating from a series of enormous steam-heated vats used for rendering fat and cleaning casings. One vat in particular drew their attention. It was a colossal iron cauldron, nearly 8 feet long and 4 feet deep, filled with a thick, dark, gelatinous sludge. A greasy, rainbow-coloured film coated the surface of the viscous liquid. This was the source of the overpowering stench. Police learned that just days before Louisa's disappearance, Adolph Luetgert had ordered an unusually large quantity of potash, a powerful alkaline substance. He had instructed his night watchman to keep the fires burning under this specific vat, a highly unusual order for a factory that was not in active production. The pieces were beginning to click into place, forming a picture of horrifying premeditation. The task ahead was grim, a descent into the macabre. There was no choice but to drain the vat and examine its contents. With a heavy sense of foreboding, the officers began the nauseating process. They scooped out the foul-smelling, semi-liquid substance bucket by bucket, pouring it through fine mesh sieves. The work was slow, disgusting, and physically taxing. For hours they found nothing but congealed grease and chemical residue. The hope of finding anything definitive began to wane, replaced by the sickening reality of their task. It seemed as though the corrosive power of the potash might have been absolute, leaving no trace of what it had consumed. But then, a shout. A detective holding a sieve stared intently at something caught in the mesh. The other officers gathered around, their lanterns converging on the small object. When the police investigated, what they found was chilling. It was a fragment of bone, small and blackened, but unmistakably organic. The discovery electrified the search team. Their efforts redoubled, and they began sifting through the sludge with renewed feverish intensity. Soon another discovery, and another. Inside the factory, they uncovered evidence that Louisa had been murdered. Bits of her remains were found hidden in the sausage vats. More bone fragments emerged from the greasy depths, pieces of a skull, a rib, a toe bone. Then something metallic, a glint of gold amidst the grime. Carefully cleaned, it was revealed to be a simple wedding band. A moment later, a second ring was found, this one more ornate, bearing a looping inscription. As an officer wiped away the last of the filth, the engraved initials became clear. LL. They were Louisa Luetgert's rings. The discovery of the rings was the irrefutable link. These were not the bones of some animal accidentally rendered down. This was the final desperate testament of the missing woman. The search continued, unearthing a false tooth, a corset steel, and other minute, heartbreaking traces of a human body systematically destroyed. Equipment meant for processing meat had been used to try to destroy the body. The very machinery that had built Adolph Luetgert's fortune had been turned into an instrument of annihilation. The potash, the roaring fires, the immense vat. It was a calculated industrial-scale effort to erase a human being from existence. The scene in the basement was a tableau of modern horror, a place where the sterile efficiency of the factory had been co-opted for the most personal and brutal of crimes. The evidence was overwhelming, the implication undeniable. The man who had calmly filed a missing persons report, the successful businessman and pillar of the community, was now the prime suspect in one of the most ghastly murders the city of Chicago had ever witnessed. It was a crime beyond imagination. Luetgert was arrested and put on trial. At first he denied everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. On February the 9th, 1898, the jury found him guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, and he never regained his freedom, dying in prison just a year later, in 1899. The disappearance of Louisa Luetgert and the subsequent investigation into her husband Adolph did not remain a local Chicago affair for long. In the era of yellow journalism, a story this sensational was pure gold. It had all the necessary ingredients: a wealthy, self-made immigrant, a missing wife, whispers of infidelity, and a gruesome, almost unbelievable method of murder. The story was seized upon by newspaper magnates like William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, whose papers were locked in a fierce circulation war. The Luetgert case became a front-page fixture, not just in Chicago, but across the entire nation. Telegraph wires hummed, carrying the lurid details to every corner of the country, from the bustling streets of New York City to the quiet towns of the rural West. It was a national obsession. The case captivated the American public for a reason that went far deeper than simple, morbid curiosity. It tapped into a profound societal anxiety of the Gilded Age. This was a time of immense change, of glittering wealth juxtaposed with grinding poverty, of technological marvels and deep-seated fears about the modern world. The story of Adolph Luetgert, the so-called Sausage King, became a powerful morality play. Here was a man who embodied the American dream, an immigrant who had built a business empire from nothing. He was a pillar of his community, a symbol of prosperity and respectability, and yet behind this facade of success, the prosecution painted a picture of monstrous evil. The accusation was that this captain of industry had secretly, methodically, dissolved his wife's body in a vat of caustic chemicals within the very factory that was the source of his wealth. This duality was terrifying. It suggested that the darkness wasn't just in the shadowy alleys or impoverished slums. It could be hiding in plain sight, behind the manicured lawns and ornate facades of the new elite. It revealed the terrifying possibility that the monster could be your neighbor, your employer, the man you bought your family's dinner from. This idea that civilization was just a thin veneer over a pit of savagery was a notion that both horrified and fascinated the public. It was in this fertile ground of public fear and fascination that the most infamous and enduring legend of the case took root. As the trial unfolded, a whisper started, a rumor that spread through the city's saloons, butcher shops, and parlors with the speed of a contagion. The story went that Adolph Luetgert, in a final act of diabolical depravity, had not merely disposed of his wife's remains, he had ground them up and mixed them into his sausage products, selling them to an unsuspecting public. The rumor was potent, visceral, and tapped directly into contemporary anxieties about the industrialization of food. In an age before widespread regulation, who truly knew what went into the processed foods that were becoming increasingly common? The story of Luetgert's human sausage was the ultimate confirmation of the public's worst fears. It is critical, however, to separate the lurid folklore from the historical fact. This claim that Luetgert sold sausages containing human remains was never at any point part of the prosecution's case. It was never substantiated, and no evidence was ever presented in court to support it. The state's attorneys focused exclusively on the theory that Luetgert had destroyed Louisa's body using potash and lye in the factory's basement vat. The human sausage story was a product of public hysteria, fanned by the sensationalist press. It was a myth, a powerful and stomach-churning one, but a myth nonetheless. The prosecution knew that proving such a claim would be impossible, and more importantly, it wasn't necessary for their case. Their goal was to prove murder and the disposal of a body, not its ghoulish recycling. Though the rumor was baseless, it refused to die. Even after Luetgert was convicted and sent to Joliet Penitentiary, the story of the Sausage King haunted Chicago for decades. It became a part of the city's dark folklore, a grim bedtime story used to frighten children. Don't stay out late, or the Sausage King will get you. The tale was immortalized in folk songs, poems, and countless newspaper retrospectives. The factory, long since demolished, became a landmark of local legend, a place where ghost tours would pause and tell the chilling, albeit embellished, tale. The Luetgert case became more than a true crime story. It transformed into a modern urban legend, a cautionary tale about hidden evil. From a modern criminological perspective, the Luetgert case stands as a landmark. It was one of the first instances in American legal history where a murder conviction was secured almost entirely on forensic evidence, without a body. The testimony of chemists and anthropologists was paramount, setting a precedent for the role of expert witnesses in the courtroom. The case forced a public and legal reckoning with the idea that science could uncover the truth, even when a killer had gone to extreme lengths to erase their crime. It demonstrated that even when a body is destroyed, it can leave behind indelible traces, fragments of bone, a wedding ring, that speak for the victim. Ultimately, the legacy of the Sausage King is twofold. There is the factual legacy, a landmark case that pushed the boundaries of forensic science and captivated a nation with its grim details. And then there is the mythological legacy, a chilling piece of folklore that speaks to our deepest fears about the darkness that can hide behind a mask of respectability. The story of Adolph and Louisa Luetgert became a permanent fixture in the cultural memory of Chicago, a grim reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not creatures of fantasy, but are made of flesh and blood, living right next door, their evil hidden in plain sight. History is full of shocking stories, some more horrifying than others. The Sausage King murder reminds us that the truth can be stranger and much darker than fiction. Subscribe to Insightful Wanderer and continue exploring the hidden stories of our world.